First video today, we're going to be making Philly cheesesteak. So here's all the ingredients we have here. We just have very simple, very easy, just one red bell pepper, one onion, some vegan butter, some vegan cheese. I got the cheddar jack. You can probably just find like mozzarella or even provolone slices if you want to do that. And then we have our meat substitute, which is seitan. This is not for people who are gluten intolerant, as this is primarily made of nothing but gluten, but it has tons of protein, and this one has 28 grams of protein per serving. And then we have our hoagie breads for the Philly cheesesteak. So let's get cooking. Okay, so I'm gonna start with a pretty big pan. I'm gonna put it on medium heat. I'm just gonna put my tablespoon of butter and let that melt down as we cut the onions and vegetables. Okay, so first things first, I'm gonna cut my onion. A little tip for people who just started cooking. Something very helpful that I learned is to kind of always have a little bowl available just for all your trash, and you just kind of throw it out at the very end. Makes it easier to kind of manage your scraps and like time efficiency by just, as we're chopping and we don't want this like bit of the red bell pepper, we'll just toss it right here in the bowl. And then towards the end when we're done and we're cleaning up, what we'll do is we'll just throw all that out at once. So I'm gonna cut this in half and I'm gonna flip it over because we want strips for our Philly cheesesteak. So I'm just gonna cut in strips. So we have nice thin strips for our cheesesteak. And these are all the onions that we're gonna use for we'll do just one serving because I'm only cooking for myself, and then we'll put the rest on the side and kind of save that for another day that we cook. And then I'm going to take the red pepper, and how I like to do it, some people like to kind of cut through the top and then pull this out, the core and the membrane out, and then start to cut. What I'll do is I'll just actually take the blade and go straight down one of the sides, and then that way I have one side with no membrane. I mean, it has a little bit of membrane that you can kind of just cut off. Oops, this is supposed to go in my scrap bowl. So for this recipe, we're actually going to use probably, I want to say like half a pepper. Maybe this is like a third. So we're just going to take 2 sides off of the pepper, and this will be our pepper ingredients. And then what we're going to do, what I realize is that when you're cutting these red peppers, a lot of people tend to cut them, I guess, skin side, or this. I think this is the flesh side skin. So a lot of people like to cut these with the skin side up. I mean, because it kind of makes sense. I realize as you cut it, I mean, I have a pretty sharp knife, but as you cut it, some people have dull knives, and you'll kind of realize with this pepper, like this pepper's pretty manageable, but a lot of people will kind of chop into it and it'll just kind of like pop and snap and then fly all over the place. So I actually like to cut them with the flesh side up, and then that way they kind of just go in. It goes in just so much easier than if you were to cut it with the skin side up. I'm gonna cut these flesh side up into little strips. Okay, so before we start to prep the seitan, I'm actually gonna take the onions. I'm gonna put them on the pot and get those going so they sweat and get all caramelized. By the time we finish prepping our seitan, what we'll do is we'll just put that in as well. So I'm gonna stir this around, make sure that oil and butter gets on all the onions, and then let it sit. Let them sit and kind of caramelize. You don't have to worry too much about stirring them constantly. Just let them sit there. We kind of want them to just get a little crispy and crunchy and caramelized, and then we're going to put the peppers in later. Right now we're going to prep the seitan. So take your seitan out of the package. I'm going to cut this open. The seitan that I bought from the store is actually already cut into strips, so we don't have to worry too much about cutting it. Sometimes you'll buy seitan and it'll come in like a block, like a tofu block, and they'll just be cut like really thin slices. And what you can do is kind of peel those slices apart. They'll be about this big, like 4 inches by 4 inches. You can peel the slices apart and then kind of cut them into little rectangular shape, so then that way you can use that for your Philly cheesesteak. But we're just going to use this one that's already stripped, cut into strips from the prepackaged seitan. So I'm going to actually just stir the onions around just a little bit, just so they cook evenly. Wait for them to get nice and translucent, and then they start to get just a little kind of black char on them. And then when they start to blacken just a little bit, like these are almost ready, like just like this, we'll put the peppers in and then let those soften with the onions for a little bit as well. Okay, so the onions are starting to caramelize, so now I'm going to add the peppers. I'm going to stir these up a little bit, let them cook with the onions, get these flavors going, and I'm going to add a little bit of salt. I say a little bit, but then I'm like sprinkling a shit ton. But actually, just the salt is barely coming out. And then I'm gonna do some pepper. And we'll stir those up. Let them cook just until the peppers soften. Probably about 3 minutes. Okay, so the onions are nice and caramelized. The peppers are nice and soft. They have a nice vibrant color to them. This is the perfect time to take them. We're actually going to just take them out of the pan and put them on the side for later, for when we finish cooking our seitan. So let's do that first. Okay, so I'm going to take my bread. You should have hoagie bread. I won't admit it in this video, but I'm going to admit it that I think I brought the wrong bread. But it's the only rolls that they had at Ralph's, so it should be perfectly fine. So I'm just going to take this, I'm going to cut it open, some butter. What I generally like to do is I'll let the butter, before I even start cooking, I'll take the butter out first, so that as I'm cutting the vegetables and prepping them and cooking them, the butter will get nice and soft and be a lot easier to spread, because nobody wants to try to spread their butter and just kind of rip through their hoagie bread. So I'm just going to spread a really good amount of butter onto the bread, and then we're going to pop this on the stove and let the butter melt and let the bread crisp. So what this is going to do is add flavor, but the reason why we toast this on the stove is so that when the inside of this bread gets nice and toasted and crispy, what that's going to actually do is help keep the sandwich and all of the liquid and juices contained on the inside of the sandwich, so that as you're eating, the bread and the outsides and everything don't get all soggy. So we brought it down to about medium-low now. We're just going to place this on top. It's getting a little smoky because it's a little too hot, so we're just going to wait for the pot to cool down, put this on top, and let that get nice and toasted. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to cover it with a lid, just so that way the steam kind of cooks, or not cooks, but kind of softens the outside of the bread also, because we want to have the nice crispy center with the seitan and the vegetables and caramelized onions, but then the nice soft outside exterior of the bread. Okay, so we toasted this for just about a minute, not that long. We'll just check the underside just to see what it looks like. And there you go, nice and crisp. Okay, so we added our butter to the pan. Now we're going to add our seitan. I just added about 1/3 of the package, just because it's just going to be serving one. I'm just going to let this cook for a little bit, get a little brown, nice and brown, and then kind of just make sure it cooks evenly. Seitan generally is already made with salt, so what I'm going to do is I'm not going to add any salt to this, but I am going to add just a little bit of black pepper. And if you want, you can add like a pinch of red cayenne pepper if you like it a little spicy, but I think I'm not really in the spicy. Okay, so the seitan is starting to get just a slight hint of brown, some more crispy edges, so we're just going to say that it's done now. What we're going to do next is add it all together in one bowl, or one pot. So one pan. We're gonna add it all in one pan. So we're actually gonna turn the heat off. We're gonna add the caramelized onions and peppers back in. Get in there. Okay. And now we're actually gonna add our cheese. So we're gonna add some cheese on this. Appropriate amount. I'm just gonna say a lot is appropriate. There we go. And we're going to stir this up, combine everything together. And I'm gonna make a judgment call and say that we don't have enough cheese. So we're gonna add some more cheese. Yep. I think that's good. Okay. And we're done. We just have to add this to our hoagie bread, and we're done. We're done, boys. I'll do this in a nice, gentle manner. Oh yeah, stay in there. Oh, stand down. Let's take a bite of this bad boy. God damn. That shit's so good. Take a bite, guys. Okay, guys, so that's my take on the vegan Philly cheesesteak. If you like what you saw, please leave a like. If you want to comment. Let me know what you guys want to see, what you guys want me to cook up. I'm taking all and any requests. I hope you guys liked the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.